Mark, I want to start with you because listening to the testimony today, Tim Cook, fairly polished. Epic's lawyers did catch him contradicting himself a couple of times. The judge was mostly quiet until the end when she piped up with some fairly pointed questions. How would you wrap up the day?
Yeah, everything seemed pretty smooth and positive until the last 15 minutes or so. If I'm Apple, I really didn't like what I heard at the end. The judge was asking very pointed questions about the company's business model. She threw doubts over Apple's rationale for lowering the cut last year. If you remember, Apple halved at the end of last year its commission from 30% to 15%, calling it a move due to helping small businesses during COVID. I think most people knew that this was in reaction to regulatory scrutiny, so the judge sort of called out Tim Cook for that. And what I found most interesting is she said, you guys don't have any competition when it comes to in-app purchases. That's the system for processing payments and buying goods through the App Store. Obviously, that's true. They're really the only game in town when it comes to that. She did not ask about the idea of third-party app stores. She did not ask Tim why third-party app stores shouldn't be allowed. I think her focus is really on that in-app purchase system. And if you remember, the in-app purchase system and the third-party app store questions are the two main points of relief that Epic is asking for. So if I were a betting man, I would say most of her attention is going to be on some sort of resolution around in-app purchase. And there's a few different ways she can go about this. She can say Apple has to allow alternative payment methods inside of apps. So for example, you'd be able to buy directly from Epic in Fortnite, basically the reason they got kicked out of the App Store. The other resolution, which I think is actually far more likely, is you'll be able to, as a developer, tell users inside your app, hey, you can go to our website to finish this transaction and save us a bit of commission tax.
Interesting. As you mentioned, there are multiple scenarios here, multiple possible decisions. Of course, there's Apple winning full stop, in which case nothing changes. There's Epic winning full stops, in which case everything changes. But the most likely outcome is some sort of a mixed decision, in which case everyone appeals. Dan, what's your take? How big a risk is there here that Apple loses something?
Yeah, Mark, as always, brought up great points. I think it's contained risk, and I think that's how most investors view this. And obviously, this is a game of high-stakes poker in between Apple and Epic, and it speaks to some of the broader antitrust swirls that we're going to see because of the questions that we're seeing in California courts, the same ones we're going to see in the EU as well as the Beltway. But ultimately, we believe they've been able to defend their moat pretty strongly, again. And even though this is obviously a key test in terms of the App Store, it's the crown jewel of the services. We believe there could be some collateral damage, but ultimately pretty contained relative to the App Store and that $65 billion annual services.
Now, Epic's lawyers spent quite a bit of time trying to pin Cook down on the profitability of the App Store. Apple has maintained that they don't know exactly how profitable the App Store is, which some of the skeptics have found hard to believe. Outside experts believe the App Store in commissions alone brought in almost $22 billion. Dan, do you believe that Apple doesn't know how profitable the App Store is?
Look, obviously they're keeping their playbook close to their vest. I mean, look, if you look at services in the App Store, that clearly is a continued profitability and cash generation stream that we've seen continue to tick up over the years. And right now, that's under attack. And I think if you look at how they're defending themselves in court, and obviously today some tough questioning, I mean, they really haven't deviated from how they've defended themselves also from an antitrust perspective, what we're seeing in the EU. Very profitable. Obviously, it's more profitable than a lot of Fortune 500 companies alone if you look at that services business. But, if you look the way that they're navigating this, I think so far, and I think it's reflected in the stock, investors like what they see, although clearly risk, as we get into a decision.
Well, and a reason this profitability question is important is that Epic is trying to prove that the App Store is extraordinarily lucrative, which would be a sign of monopoly behavior, if you will. Mark, talk to us a little bit about how Tim Cook performed and responded across the board. There were a range of issues, other issues that came up in addition to competitiveness of the operating system, how iCloud works in China, which seemed a little bit off topic, as well as the security of Macs versus iPhones?
To be honest with you, I heard a lot of I don't know, or ask Phil about this, or ask Google about this. I heard a lot of him sort of passing, the buck on a lot of questions. The question for me is, does Tim Cook actually not know the answers to these questions? Or was he, trained not to answer them if they get too difficult or too in the weeds, not to back Apple into a corner? So that was one of the interesting things to me. I do want to touch about the profitability thing you asked about too, right? I don't believe Apple on that at all. I think they're completely splitting hairs. I think there's basically two types of profitability. There's the core profitability where they calculate it. What they're saying they're not able to calculate is all the other extra stuff, right? They try to say it's an all-in-one ecosystem. Can you really factor in development costs? Can you really factor in the price of the iPhone that goes into buying the App Store? So there's a lot more math that goes into it. So I think that obviously they can calculate the profitability. Apple's simply saying it goes a lot further. And I think it's a little interesting that Apple has been basically shooting down internal documents that were collected in the discovery process from Epic and provided by Apple too. So it's very interesting, and if I'm the judge, I really don't buy this profitability question. The question for me is, how relevant is a lot of this? Epic was asking Apple about iCloud in China. They were raising issues about platform lock-in. And they've done a lot of, portraying Apple as the big bad wolf and this, negative company, and this company, but, full of, inconsistent testimony. But a lot of that really doesn't go to the core of the issue. Epic didn't do a good job proving why there should be third-party app stores. Apple did a good job proving why there shouldn't be third-party app stores. Epic didn't do a great job proving why Apple shouldn't be the only offer in town for in-app purchases, but Apple didn't do a good job proving why they should be. So I really do think it's all going to come down to that in-app purchase system.
Right, and Apple and Tim Cook today doubled down on the idea that it is about users, it is about privacy, it is about security. He said Apple puts the user at the center of everything. It's not about the money. I believe that was word for word. Dan, how much do you think the regulatory risk, whether it's in this case or beyond, is an overhang here? How concerned are you, from an investment perspective, that Apple could be facing more scrutiny down the road, regardless of what happens here?
Oh yeah, a bright spotlight. And it speaks to ultimately why every regulator, both in the US as well as in Europe, is watching this so carefully. And Cook, everything he said will ultimately reverberate over the coming years, because in this climate, big tech's under attack. We're seeing it across the board: Apple, Amazon, Facebook, and others. And Apple recognizes that the App Store, the 30% fee, that's the Game of Thrones. That's the area. Epic's obviously clearly going after them right now. But this, even if Apple wins with flying colors, they're going to continue to battle this over in Brussels and the Beltway for years to come. And it's an overhang in the stock. I believe it's a 10 to 12% overhang on the stock right now if we look at how investors are gauging it.